What brought me into the behavioral health field was really my own recovery journey. When I was 19 years old, I was fresh out of treatment and walking through that initial phase of recovery and really just needed a job. So it was really by happenstance that I started in the field. I was working at a little frozen yogurt stand, and a friend of mine who was working in community mental health detox just said, "Hey, do you need a job?" And I said, "Hey, I don't have a lot going on, so sure, let's do it." And I started working at that center, navigating crisis with individuals struggling with mental health and substance use, and really fell in love with the work, just supporting people in these really challenging times in their life. And I went back to school, became an addiction counselor, and started working in various phases of the treatment continuum: residential, IOP, outpatient, and decided that I really wanted to work more with families and really support them long term in helping them to navigate their loved ones' addiction or mental health, and also develop some level of family thriving. And so I've been doing that for 4 years now. I started Maxwell Recovery Services because I saw a gap in the treatment continuum as it related to continuity of records, as it related to all of the providers on the team really actively collaborating and talking with each other. And on top of that, so often individuals, particularly individuals who have been to 5, 10, 15, 20 treatment centers, there was this level of fragmentation that would often occur where they would go to a center, they would participate, and then really, the retention wasn't there, where they would either leave treatment early or they would leave treatment without a solid aftercare plan, or they just wouldn't participate and follow through with their aftercare plan. And so what I found is having this support, this advocate for the family and the person to walk alongside them through the entirety of the process actually really helped with retention. We know, and every family that's gone through this treatment process with a loved one knows how time intensive, how expensive, how sort of emotionally challenging it is to walk through the treatment process. So in many ways, I see our role as being in retention as a little bit of insurance to sort of protect the emotional and often financial investment that comes with treatment, and being able to really maximize a person's care in a way that leads to better outcomes. My favorite part about this work is getting the opportunity to walk with families through what is often some of the most challenging circumstances of their life, navigating their loved one's addiction, mental health challenges. I think families, a lot of families that I work with and talk to, in a lot of ways they know what to do, right? They have information, they have education, obviously not all, but many. And if they were sitting down with a friend of theirs who was going through a similar circumstance, they would often give really good advice, but the reality for many of those families is putting that into practice is so much more difficult. And so what I love is the ability to be that calm voice in the room, to be able to support them in taking that knowledge that they have, that understanding that they have, and really put it into practice so that we can increase the odds of a really positive, solid outcome, not just for their loved one, but for themselves, right? I think we can sometimes get really hung up on the person of concern and sort of their challenges, but the impact that this has on families in their own nervous system, in their own quality of life, is also really significant, right? So supporting them in developing family resiliency, in developing the ability to cope with these stressors. What ends up happening as a result, paradoxically, is when families can really develop those skills, their loved one also has so much of a better opportunity to heal and to grow and to sort of move forward. I also love using my brain to solve what are often pretty complex problems. Families have been navigating this for a long time. There are patterns of behavior and patterns of reactivity that have developed over years and years. And so helping them to kind of untangle the challenges that have occurred as a result of that so that they can move forward in a really positive way. I think as the result of a lot of different cultural forces in the world today, I think families are really struggling in providing the right support for their loved one to move along developmental stages, right, and really move into a place of adulthood. Even for individuals who are in their 30s, in their 40s, where families are having a really hard time sort of detaching and allowing individuals to have their own experience. And I think that is very sensical in a lot of ways because these individuals are struggling with substance use, with mental health, and families have adopted this need to keep them safe, right? Which makes complete sense. At the same time, those patterns, as they become really solidified, impact that individual's ability to recognize their need for change and also to develop the necessary skill set to be a healthy, thriving, independent adult. I also think for families navigating this with a loved one who is very much in the right developmental stage, I think some of the remnants of that still stand, which is, on one hand, we know this person needs to have their own experience. We know that they need to develop their own motivation long term to achieve their goals. And at the same time, the risks of them not succeeding are so high. As a professional, I'm trying to help families create some safety bumper rails, some guardrails, while also allowing their loved one to have their own experience. I think the best thing that families can do as they're walking through that is obviously getting their loved one the right treatment. I think that's essential, but also developing their own tools, their own strategies to navigate through their loved one's challenges with a degree of calm, with a degree of intuition, and with a willingness on some level to allow their loved one to have their own experience, to experience those bumps, those peaks and valleys, and come out the other side better for it. And I think it's important to note that foundationally to all of that is safety, right? So on top of all of that, we're trying to take steps and put things in place so that their loved one can be safe as they walk through this experience for themselves. When people think about the term intervention, they often have this picture in their mind of this confrontational, secretive, and often kind of shaming process. I think for a lot of families, that's one of the reasons, sort of the fears that they have about participating in an intervention for a loved one is this fear that it's going to be super shaming, that it's going to lead to this huge emotional blow up. And, with a lot of individuals who are really struggling, no matter how kind and loving we are, there may still be a blow up, certainly. But how I view intervention is more than anything this structured, loving conversation, right? And the reason I say structured is, when we've been involved in these patterns for a really long time, I think it's really easy for families to inadvertently devolve into arguments, into conflict. And so really when we're having that conversation, when we're inviting the loved one into this opportunity for changing their life, for getting into treatment, it's important that we have just a little bit of structure around what's our narrative, right? How are we conveying the message that A, we love you, B, we're concerned, and C, we're inviting you into this opportunity for change. So really, when we think about intervention, it's this structured process of really getting the individual really temporarily motivated to access care, with the understanding that that temporary motivation really leads them to the first step where they are getting the right treatment. And then sort of the next phase of the process commences, which is how do we keep them in treatment? How do we build recovery capital? How do we get them on the right sort of medication or psychiatric regimen? How do we help build routines, things like that? But intervention can look really, really different depending on the situation. I think the way we approach it at Maxwell Recovery Services is very individualized, right? So we start with a really detailed assessment of that individual's needs, what they need in terms of treatment, but also their psychology, right? What's going to motivate, inspire, and encourage them to access the care that they need. And we tailor our approach based on that, right? So sometimes that can really look like a very invitational, sort of soft process. Sometimes, particularly as it relates to safety concerns, we do need to take a more sort of firm, immediate stance, right, to navigate that crisis. But either way, that's really tailored to the individual situation, the family situation, and really capitalizing on the strengths of the family, as well as what's important to the individual in order to motivate them for change. And I think it's important to note that intervention in and of itself doesn't produce that change long term, right? That's why the person needs to access the right treatment, why they need the right support long term. So the goal is not to wake them up and produce this permanent change. It's really to start the process for them of getting healthy. Comprehensive recovery navigation is a structured, clinically informed process of case management, of family coaching, of individual coaching, and care coordination for the individual and for that family system. We're looking at both the family and the individual's needs and really trying to maximize that person's treatment experience, right? Get them in touch with the right providers. We tour all around the country. We meet some of the best providers in the country in terms of behavioral health, whether that's mental health or addiction. So really getting people in touch with the right people at the right time. On top of that, we're helping to retain sort of the positive gains that the person is making in treatment, helping to support their aftercare planning, and really providing that continuity through every phase of their treatment process, from residential to IOP, PHP, outpatient, and then eventually sort of independent recovery process. On top of that, comprehensive recovery navigation also includes our own supervision process. So we sit down and staff our cases with a licensed mental health clinician. We have a family support group that meets once a week with another licensed clinician. We're not providing therapy. We're providing that coaching, that case management, that consulting work, but we're doing it within this larger infrastructure of clinical sophistication and really clinically informed thought process, right? So we're also advocating for the family and for the individual while they're involved in treatment. So we're really, helping everyone, make sure that everyone is on the same page about what we're working on, that everyone's working towards the same goals. And we're really providing that glue within the treatment team so that this experience that, often requires so much from individuals and families is really maximized. And we're creating this great synergy with the clinical team so that those goals that we're working on can be accomplished more effectively and faster. I think one of the things that makes Maxwell Recovery Services so unique is we've really invested a lot in some of the intangibles that actually create so much more ability to support individuals in the right way and to think long term. The intangibles being sort of that clinical oversight and support, it's the family group, it's the small team collaborative approach that we take, and it's the education and the continued investment that we make in vetting the right programs, being in touch with the right people so that we can get families the highest level of support and get individuals the highest level of support, the best providers in the country, and really set up a cohesive, comprehensive treatment team to support the individual and the family. I think we have this structure, this approach, this sort of methodical way of thinking about a long-term roadmap as opposed to a band-aid solution, an immediate crisis that really helps in the long run to achieve a successful outcome. I tell families all the time, our job is to become obsolete, right? And how do we do that? We create an infrastructure around that family and that individual that will support them not just in the immediate short term, but as they move forward and as they move to a place of thriving in their life. One piece of advice that I would give to families is, first of all, you do not need nor should you know how to handle and support your loved one's high acuity mental health or substance use challenges. I think very few people were given a playbook on how to handle this with a loved one and how to support a loved one through this, and that's okay. I think understanding that having the right support, not just for your loved one's treatment episode, but also for your family system as they move through this process, understanding that can actually be a really helpful and often vital support. No one was given a playbook on how to do this, right? So I think the first and foremost piece of advice is to get the support that you need. I also think that doing that proactively really helps families get set up for success, because you don't know what you don't know, right? A loved one can be really presenting very well, can be in a really good sort of mental headspace, but transitions are hard, bumps will come up. And so thinking strategically and long-term as opposed to that immediate short-term crisis is often the difference between successful outcome and years of struggle. One thing that I tell my clients and families often is I only want us to have to do this once, maybe twice, right? The national average for the amount of treatment episodes, at least for substance use, before a person achieves sustained remission is 5 treatment episodes. I don't have to tell anyone who's gone through that how emotionally challenging that is, how expensive that is, how much time goes into that. So if we can do everything we can now to create a long-term roadmap for change, obviously there are no guarantees, no crystal balls, but the hope is that we can really cut down on the unnecessary trial and error that comes when families are just trying to navigate this all by themselves.